Hi, welcome back to the Women of Wonder Bible Study. We are going to be jumping into week 3 of our study. If you haven't had a chance to watch week 1 and 2, I would really encourage you to go back and watch those as they really lay a foundation for where we're headed today. In week 1, we discovered what our new identity is in our new life through Christ. And in week 2, we looked at how partnering with a scarcity mindset can lead us into living out a false identity, which can kind of sabotage what God has for us. So we're going to dive into week 3. If you have your Women of Wonder Bible study, grab it, grab the scriptures, grab a highlighter, something to write with, and let's get started. This week's central idea is this: we receive our position and our authority from God, not the world. It is as simple as that. Our authority and our position come from Him. The first time that we meet Rahab is in the book of Joshua in chapter 2. Joshua is getting ready to send 2 spies out to the city of Jericho because God has told him that they are going to take the city. And these 2 spies, it says this in chapter 2, so they went and they entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab, and they stayed there. So the first time that we meet Rahab, before we even know her name, she is identified as a prostitute or a harlot. Now, this can be interpreted in many different ways, but what we can know by this is that she was most likely outcasted and that her reputation, according to the world, would not have been possibly neat or very clean. Why would they have chosen Rahab's house of all the places in Jericho? Well, it's believed that Rahab's house was actually either within the walls of Jericho or connected to the walls of Jericho, giving the spies easy access to escape when needed. So these men come to her and she invites them into her home. Now, as the story unfolds, what we don't realize is that she has heard of the things of the Lord. She did not grow up in a family that worshiped Yahweh or knew of the traditions, but she had been told the stories of the magnificent things, the powerful things that God had done. Now, what is amazing to me is that the king finds out about this. The king of Jericho finds out about this, and he sends people to her door to try to intimidate her and ask her where these people are. And instead of giving away these strangers, she hides them and she sends the guards off in a cat and mouse chase in the wrong direction. She says, yes, I saw them, but they went that way. I sent them that way. So she sends them off in a different direction. How often in our own lives are we faced with these moments where she had this opportunity, where she could choose worldly comfort? She could choose worldly protection. If she gave the spies away, she would have been guaranteed a high level of patriotism. She would have been protected by this king. But instead, she chose to risk her life, to really risk everything for something greater, for something more eternal. Because as she was hiding the spies, what we learn is that she has began to experience the fear of the Lord. She has began to experience the wonder of God, and she is willing to stick her neck out for this purpose. So before the spies laid down at night, she went up to the rooftop and she said this to them: I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and a great fear has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard of how the Lord dried up the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. So what we see here is she's showing her cards to these men, these strangers, and she's saying, I know you're from the Lord, and I know that your Lord is magnificent, and I know he's given you this land. And so she's looking for this opportunity to partner with them. Later on, down in the scriptures, it says, when we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord, your God, is God in heaven above and on earth below. She exchanges her worldly safety, and she shows her cards to these men, and essentially to say, I am nothing. I am a prostitute, but I know that you are from somebody who is greater. I know that you are from the God of heavens and earth, and I believe. And in this moment, the men begin to give her this exchange. She asks for them to save her life. A life for a life. She saved these two spies. She hid them, she housed them, and before they were sent off, she helped them, gave them direction. They trusted her, and they said to her, we will save you. We are coming back, yes, to take your land, but we will spare your life. Not only your life, but your family's lives. But in order for us to spare your lives, you must do this. You must have a red rope hung out from your window. And this is that beautiful symbol of Passover, that they will be passed over. They will not be touched. Blood will not be shed on this house. So not only do we see Rahab risking her life by hiding the spies, but now we see her having to go and evangelize to her family to say, you will be spared. God used Rahab's story to move from a harlot, a prostitute, to a heroine and a hero of faith. We see this in the New Testament in Hebrews, where Paul is talking to people. He's giving them an example of what faith looks like. And in Hebrews 11:1, he says this, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance for what we do not see. He's giving this platform, trying to explain to them, this is what faith looks like. It has to be lived out. Faith is a life of risk, no different than the way in which Rahab lived her life. And he uses her as an example along with the other heroes of faith. In verse 31, he says this, by faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Our obedience and our faith is what gives us our position and our authority. Those things are grounded in God, not the labels, not the things that the world has said about us. Those things, sometimes, even with good intention, can hold us down. I want you to think, what are some of the things that you have been called in your life? Maybe you've been called too much, not enough, too passionate, a perfectionist, an overachiever, not smart, spoiled, insensitive, too loud, too shy, too young, too old. The list goes on, but these things can hold us back from really walking out our identities, our position, and our authority. Years ago, when I met one of my good friends, she was held down by the labels in which the world had put on her. She says this, the labels I always heard were entitled, shy, stupid, spoiled, perfect, innocent, Jesus freak. And when we first met, you could see the ways in which these labels were crippling to her. And they crippled her until God spoke to her and God gave her her identity. She let those things go. She stopped listening to the voices of the world, and God's voice became very loud in her life. She said, God calls me a tree. You see, my roots have always been with the good Lord, and with God's voice and actions, I sprout a little more life in each season. That is powerful and beautiful. Her roots are no longer in what the world says about her. Her roots are now within what God says about her. I have watched her flourish. I have watched her position increase. I have watched her authority increase as she has submitted to the Lord and walked out in risk and in confidence in Him. That is beautiful. That to me is an example of the way in which Rahab lived her life. God is calling us to rid ourselves of the labels of the world. And so if you have the study, I encourage you to continue looking at the life of Rahab this week, working through the journaling questions and the discussion questions and the prayer. But if you don't, I want to leave you with this question. Rahab didn't allow the way the world saw her as a prostitute to keep her from faithfully giving her life to God. What labels has the world placed on your life that you need to rid yourself of? Again, anytime we journal, I encourage you to sit in the quiet place in the presence of the Lord and wait on Him to speak to you about those labels, because I believe He might even begin to show you labels that you didn't even realize were holding you back. I believe that God wants to increase your position and your authority in His kingdom. We have to make space and allow Him to do that in our lives. And so my prayer for you this week is that you are able to each and every day continue to shed the labels that the world has put on you, even the ones with good intentions, and begin to continue walking out that new identity in confidence and in grace. I hope that this week was a blessing to you, and I'm so excited to see you next week.